Appreciate that, Billy. So we went through the I ams in John. We went through the 7 I ams. And so now I want to go through the 7 signs in John. John is writing his gospel. He told us why he wrote his gospel. And that is so that we will believe. We will believe that Jesus is the Messiah. He's the Christ. He's who he claimed to be. And so he's gonna go through these signs to prove that Jesus was who he claimed to be, to prove that Jesus was the Messiah. I enjoyed the I ams that we went through. And so I want to stay in John. You know, one of the reasons why I want to do this is because I want us to know this book so well. I just want us to oh yeah, that's in John. And oh yeah, I just want us to know this. I want us to know this book. And so going through these 7 signs, I think will help us to know Jesus better and to know this book better. Jesus will say, "I am," and then he will give a discourse. He will talk. He gave us John chapter 3, John 3:16, and all of that. And he'll talk a while, and then he'll do a sign. He'll do a miracle. And so the book kind of goes back and forth between him doing a miracle and talking to us and telling us who he is and what he's all about. And John said, "I've written this book so that you will believe. You'll believe that he's the Christ." Well, he's gonna get the early disciples' attention today, and they're going to believe after what he did. And so let's just go ahead and read this, and then we'll talk about the 7 signs, and we'll talk about this one in particular. We'll read 1 through 12 of John 2. On the 3rd day, a wedding took place in Cana of Galilee. Jesus' mother was there, and Jesus and his disciples were invited to the wedding as well. When the wine ran out, Jesus' mother told him, "They don't have any wine." "What does that have to do with me and you, woman?" Jesus asked. "My hour has not yet come." "Do whatever he tells you," his mother told the servants. Now 6 stone water jars had been set there for Jewish purification. Each contained 20 or 30 gallons. "Fill the jars with water," Jesus told them. So they filled them to the brim. And then he said to them, "Now draw out some and take it to the head waiter." And they did. When the head waiter tasted the water after it had become wine, he did not know where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. And he called the groom and told him, "Everyone sets out the fine wine first, then after people are drunk, the inferior. But you have kept the fine wine until now." Jesus did this, the first of his signs, in Cana of Galilee. He revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. After this, he went down to Capernaum together with his mother and brothers and disciples, and they stayed there only a few days. God's people said, Amen. Please be seated. And so there's 7 signs in John. We like that number 7, and John seems to like that number 7 as well. Revelation has tons of 7s in it, as we know. So 7 obviously is a very symbolic number. So when we say the 7 signs in John, these are the signs that lead up to the crucifixion and resurrection. Because there's actually a couple after. There's the resurrection itself. That could be considered a sign for sure that he proved who he claimed to be by coming back from the dead. And then there was the miraculous catch of fish. What was it, 163 fish that they caught in John 21. And so he does a couple of more. But these are the 7 that lead up to his death and resurrection. The first is today, turning water into wine. We've heard that all of our lives. We just sang it in a song. It's just so common to us. We just don't really think that much about it. But I want us to really think about it today, what exactly it was that he did. But that's his first sign. The second is healing the royal official's son. The third sign is healing the disabled man. That's the man that was trying to get into the pool at Siloam and couldn't get into the pool. Jesus healed him. And then the feeding of 5,000. This is, of course, in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Him walking on the water. That's most certainly a miraculous sign that he did. And then he also calmed the sea right after that. And then in John 9, we have him healing the man who was born blind. Remember, the disciples had the question, did he sin or did his parents? Why was he born blind? And Jesus answers that. And then raising Lazarus from the dead. Now this is one that will intersect with one of the I ams, because he said, I am the resurrection and the life. And then he walked over and he called Lazarus out from the dead. So we'll run into that again as we go through this. So those are the 7 signs. And then after that, he himself came back from the dead. And then there was also the miraculous catch of fish. But these are what we call the 7 signs of John. And so today we come to this first one. And I'm just going to walk through it, see if I can unpack it a little bit, and then I'll see if I can make some applications that encourage us today. Because we in here all certainly need encouragement. And so I'm going to try to encourage us as well. But let's just walk through this sort of like a Bible study and see if we can unpack what happened. But it's so interesting to me that this chapter starts off on the 3rd day. We know there's symbolism anytime something in the Bible says on the 3rd day. I mean, that's, John is aware that he's saying this. But if you go back into chapter 1, he talks about that John the Baptist saw Jesus and said, I'm not fit to tie his shoes. That's him. And then his disciples left him and started following. And then John said, and then on the next day, is when he called Philip and Nathanael. And then when we get to this chapter, he says, and on the 3rd day. And so this bang, 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 these 3 events happen quickly. That John the Baptist loses a couple of his disciples to Jesus, tells us who Jesus is, and that's where we get Andrew, and then Andrew goes and gets Peter. And I believe that James and John were part of that too, just from looking at there was another disciple with Philip. I think that was John. And so, and then he gets Philip. So he gets Philip, Andrew, Peter, and then Nathanael. He told Nathanael, I saw you under the tree, and you're a man without guile. And so I believe he's got at least 6 disciples at this point. As he's going along, he calls Matthew. As he's going along, Judas comes in, and the other disciples come in. But I think he's got at least the first half. This is very early in his ministry, and he hasn't performed any signs yet. He hasn't performed any miracles yet. He hasn't started his preaching yet. I mean, he's kind of getting started. He's gathering his disciples, and I think he's got the first 6 with him at this point. And they're invited to this wedding at Cana, and Jesus' mother's there, and he's there with his disciples. And Cana is about 10 miles north of Nazareth. And Jesus grew up in Nazareth. And so Cana literally is to Nazareth what Elkhart is to Palestine. It's a smaller, little kind of a bedroom community about 10 miles out. So it's the same exact setup, the same exact thing. And there's a lot of interaction between the 2 little communities, obviously, because Jesus' mother is invited to this wedding. There's been some speculation of whose wedding this might be, and you can study that. There's some interest there. But since John doesn't tell us here, I'm not going to spend any more time on that. But they're invited. Jesus is invited to this wedding, and his mother's there too, and she's invited, and she's obviously friends or kinfolk with who's getting married, because she's concerned about what happens. Now, you know that the weddings lasted a week or 2. We know that the bridegroom would go and prepare the place, and then he would come get the bride. And there was a lot of celebration. There was a lot of partying that would happen at a wedding. This was the big social event of the year when there was a wedding. It was a big deal. And they would serve all the wine that they could afford for the party, this week-long party. And if the wine ever would run out, that was a tremendous embarrassment to the family. It's just not done. This is not what you're supposed to do. You've invited everybody, all the officials and the rich people and your friends and your kin folks, and they're looking at you. And if the wine runs out, this is an embarrassment. And so Mary comes up to Jesus and says, hey, they've run out of wine. Now, it's interesting that she comes to Jesus. First of all, I think this tells her that Joseph had died at this time. I think she probably would have gone to Joseph if he was still alive. Now, we know that Joseph dies sometime between when Jesus was 12, that's the last we hear of him, and the crucifixion. Because when Jesus is on the cross, one of the things he says, and it's in John 19, it's in this book, is he says, woman. He uses that same word, woman, there that he uses here, woman. He says, woman, behold your son. And he gave Mary to John. Now, he wouldn't have done that if Joseph had still been alive. And so we know that the Lord had taken Joseph home before Jesus' crucifixion. I believe that Joseph was already gone at this time because, and the only hint I have is that Mary, his mother, comes to him, Jesus, the oldest son, and says, what are we going to do? We're out of wine. And there's so much into this that we can speculate on, that we can wonder about. The fact that she comes to Jesus, is she expecting him to perform a miracle here? Or is she just expecting him to do something? You kind of have to wonder if maybe all of Jesus' life, Mary, his mother, would come to him when there was a problem and say, look, we need this fixed, and Jesus would take care of it. You definitely get the impression that that's the type of child that Jesus was, that he would fix things. He, not necessarily by a miracle, but he just knew how to make things happen. He would fix things. He might have done some miracles that she didn't realize was a miracle. I'm not saying he was deceiving her, but I'm just saying you know that she went to him and said, hey, look, we need help. We've got to fix this. And she's coming to him. She's saying, fix this. They're out of wine. This is bad. This is going to be really bad for this family. I mean, their reputation is going to be really wounded by this. I mean, they're going to be laughed at and put down in their little Elkhart community for years to come. If we can't come up with some solution. Maybe she's thinking that Jesus and his disciples had already started carrying a money purse and they could run to Nazareth and get some wine and bring it back. I mean, she's just saying, hey, what are we going to do? Now, it might be that she had seen him do a miracle or so, and she's asking for that. But I kind of feel like that she's not really thinking so much miracle at this point, as she's just thinking, hey, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And his answer to her, as I was growing up as a kid, it was always funny to me. I think I giggled when I was a kid in church and the preacher preached out of the King James, woman, what have I to do with thee? That's his answer in the King James. Woman, what have I to do with thee? I remember going home and saying that to my mom, just where we're, because she told me to do something. Woman, what, just laughing, because that sounds so funny to us. And he uses that same word woman here that he used on the cross, by the way. And from what I understand, this is the equivalent of ma'am. But it is significant that he calls her ma'am here. He calls her woman and not mom. And I think it might just be that he's letting her know that their relationship is changing. Their relationship has got to change when his ministry begins. And he's not Jesus, her son, anymore. He's Jesus, the Messiah now. Their relationship's having to change. There's a time when Jesus was in a house and Mary and some of the brothers, his little brothers, half-brothers you might call them, came and they're standing outside. Somebody said, Jesus, your mother and your brothers are here. And he says, who's my mother and who's my brothers? those that follow me. And so he's saying, my family now is the family. Yeah, it is the family of God now. This is more important. And so we do see a change. I think what Jesus is saying, because he says, what is that, let me read it in here. What does that have to do with you and me? Is the way my Bible translates that. What does that have to do with you and me? I think he's saying, let me just keep finishing. Jesus asked, my hour has not yet come. And so Jesus is trying. He's trying to get ready. He's gathering some disciples. He's gearing up to begin his ministry. He's 30 at this point. And, that's the age that a priest, that a rabbi, and a priest begins their ministry is at this age. And so he's reached this age. But he's just about to launch his ministry, and she's kind of forcing his hand to go ahead and start. And I think the Holy Spirit spoke to him. He's God, he's Jesus, and I think in his spirit he knew, you know what? Let's go. Let's start. Because when she first spoke to him, she kind of caught him off guard. He's gearing up. He's at a wedding. He's celebrating. He and the disciples, are the part of the reason why they ran out of wine. And so they're partying. They're sitting around. They're drinking the wine. Mary comes up and says, "Hey, we're out of wine." And he says, "Well, what's that got to do with you and me? What is it that you're asking me to do?" And there could be some things that are spoken in there between them that we don't have recorded. John himself tells us that he didn't even try to record everything that Jesus said or did. He said the whole world couldn't contain the books. So we're getting snippets. We're getting an outline of what happened here. And he sort of says, now look, I haven't started my ministry yet. I haven't started doing this type of thing yet. And I just love this. I just think she just kind of looks at him like, we're out of wine. What are you going to do? Guys, that needs to be our attitude toward Jesus. Because I don't understand this. I don't know what you're going to do. But what you're going to do. I think we need to have that attitude toward Jesus. I think we need to learn something from his mama. And she looks over at the servants and she says, do whatever he tells you. Now, these are paid servants. They're hired. They're hired hands. They're hired to be there to work this thing. And The Chosen kind of gives us a neat look at this. And, that they had hired, I think it was, is it Philip? Thomas. Yeah, thank you. Thank y'all. Golly. Thomas and his girlfriend. Yeah. And so, they kind of flesh this out a little bit. But, and so it's really neat. But she just looks at the servants. She says, do whatever he tells you. I think she's expecting a miracle at this point. She really is. She's just like, whatever he says, he's going to fix this thing. Because he's Mr. Fix-It. He always fixes it for me. He's going to fix this. Whatever he tells you to do, you do it. Now, she might have been thinking, run into town and buy more. He's going to give you the money. We don't know. But there's these 6 huge clay jars. I tried to get a picture of something. And he says these things are 20 to 30 gallons. That's a lot. That's a lot of water. That's heavy. And he says they used them for Jewish purification. The Jews would wash their hands before everything. And this was for them to wash their hands. They would dip the water out and put it in a bowl, and they would wash their hands. They washed their hands a lot. It was a ritual thing with them. And so that's what they were using all this water for. Well, they fill them to the brim. This is all behind the scenes, back somewhere in some room. They've got these 6 huge jars of water. If they were 30 gallons each, that's 180 gallons of wine that he made that night. And so they fill them to the brim. It kind of reminds us of the widow back in the Old Testament that filled the jars with oil. And however many she filled, that's how much oil they had. I mean, she actually didn't have any. She just gathered the jars and brought them in. And then she had one little thing of oil. She starts pouring it. And, depending on how many jars she had, that's how much oil she got. Well, depending on how many jars of water they had, that's how much wine they got. And they filled them all to the brim, which I think is an important little detail. First of all, I think it tells me that John is there because he's given us these little details like this. And that's one reason why I believe he's an eyewitness to this. But also, there's no room for them to cheat and add wine into the water, because the water is filled to the brim. And I love how understated John is here. He doesn't say that Jesus stood there and went, "Make wine," abracadabra. Yeah, thank you. It doesn't say that he said anything. Now he might have looked at the wine. He might have stuck his finger. But you really just get the impression that he just willed it to happen. As soon as they filled it with with water, it just turned into wine. And it was the best wine that they had ever tasted. And wouldn't you love to taste that? Don't you know that it would be the best that you've ever had and will ever have? And it's so understated. John just says they dipped it out and took it to the head waiter, the water that had now turned to wine. But yet this is his first miracle. This is a miracle. Back in Genesis, God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And so he spoke everything into existence. And here he may have spoken, or he may have just simply willed it to happen. He just wanted it to happen, and it happened. And I don't want us, we've always heard he changed water into wine, and there's been jokes about it and all this. He changed water into wine. No. Let's don't forget what a big deal that was. Let's don't forget how supernatural that was. That doesn't just happen. It's absolutely impossible for that to happen. For water to just suddenly turn into the best wine ever. How could that happen just out of nothing? But yet God created the entire universe. In Colossians 1:16 tells us that Jesus created the entire universe out of nothing. Only thing he had to work with here was the water. He didn't have any of the ingredients. We talked about the wine, the grapes, and all that last Sunday. We said, "I'm the true vine." So coming back to wine and coming back to grapes, this is a theme we have in the Bible. And wine is symbolic of joy in the Old Testament. And so the symbolism is there. And he just wanted it. 180 gallons worth. He just wanted it to become wine. And just like that, it did. When we gather together, it's not just a pep rally. It's not just to say, "You can do this," and pat each other on the back. And you know what? I've been through that too, and we can do this together. And it's going to be okay. All of that's true, and we hug each other and we encourage each other and we tell each other the things that we're facing, and we try to say encouraging words, and it's all true. But if it just ended there, then this would just simply be a pep rally for a politician he is the king of the universe. But this account reminds us that our God is supernatural. And that He can take something that's absolutely impossible and make it possible. The angel told Mary, nothing is impossible with God. And so we might be facing a situation that's just absolutely impossible that there could be a good outcome, or that, where is this going to go? There's no way this is going to have a happy ending. There's no way that this is going to be good. There's no way that I'm going to get through this. But Jesus is showing us here that no matter what it is that we ever face, He can do the impossible. The universe itself being here in existence, you're being here, you're being alive. That's just impossible. But God made it happen because He wanted it to happen. He willed everything into existence. He may have spoken at times. He may have just wanted it, and it happened. And here in this case, as far as we know, He didn't even glance at the wine. They just filled it up, and it turned into... They filled it with water, and it was immediately wine. Just because He wanted it to happen. He may have looked at it. He may have said a little prayer. May have stuck His finger. We don't know. He may have tasted it, make sure. I don't think He needed to. It's not like He didn't trust Himself. He knew. He just... Take that to the head waiter. And he says, wow. Everybody puts out the good stuff first. And then everybody's had, plenty to drink. They don't care anymore. Then they bring out the cheap stuff. You have saved the best till last. The best till now. Because he didn't know where it had come from. He had no idea. And they brought this out. And so, our God is in the miracle business. Church is not just a pep rally. We have a God who can literally fix things. We have a God who can literally create things and fix things and heal things. We have a God who can do that. He wanted it, and it happened. He can fix whatever crisis that we might find ourselves in. Mary was in a crisis. This was a crisis for this family. May have been her sister's family that was getting married. We really don't know, but we know it was in the next town over. And she felt she had to do something, and Jesus fixed it. And I also want us to notice that He can take the ordinary, because water is just so ordinary, and He can turn it extraordinary. And He can take an ordinary life and do extraordinary things with it. He can increase our joy. He can turn all of us, we're all just water pots, and He can turn us into wine. Just at His will, He can do this. And I want us to see that when He makes something, it's the best that could ever be. Jesus is the master of quality. When He creates something, when He makes something, you better believe that what He does is the best. He's the master of quality. We think that we can make our lives good and make our lives interesting with our efforts and with what we're trying to do, but He can make it so much better. If we'll just trust Him, give our crisis to Him, give our issues to Him, our emotional ups and downs, give them to Him. He is the master of quality. He can turn things around. He can fix things. He gives us the absolute best. The abundant life that He offers is if we will give Him our ordinary. See, they had to give Him the water first. If we'll give Him our ordinary, He can turn that into extraordinary. He can turn that into the absolute best. He's the master of quality. The best life is a life that trusts in Him and that depends on Him. Now, let's not miss what happens with His disciples. Because it says the disciples saw and believed in Him. They knew who He was when they saw this. They knew who they were dealing with. They knew that He could do the supernatural. They knew that this man was from God. They didn't fully understand everything. Even after His crucifixion, they didn't fully understand. It took a while, and it's taking us a while too, to understand what we're dealing with. But we're dealing with the supernatural. When you see Him work in your life, when you see Him turn things around for you, when you see Him come in and rescue you, then you know what He can do. Then you believe. Their response was that they believed. And so they saw this first sign. They saw what He could do, what He was capable of. And they believed. That needs to be our response as well, is that we believe. Because we have not only the account of this story, but we have what He has done in our own lives. We've seen Him come through for us. And we've seen Him turn the ordinary into the extraordinary. Okay? Wonderful account this morning from John chapter 2. Stand with me this morning and let's pray together. Michael's going to come sing a final song for us. Father, I thank You that You are the master of quality and that You can